It was Christmas Eve 2002, when 27-year-old Laci Peterson vanished without a trace from her Modesto, California home. What began as a missing persons case soon turned into one of the most shocking murder trials in modern history. This is the chilling story of Laci Peterson and the husband who betrayed her. Laci Denise Rocha was born on May 4, 1975, in Modesto, California. From a young age, she radiated warmth and kindness, traits that made her beloved by family and friends alike. She had an infectious smile and a nurturing spirit, always willing to lend a hand or offer a comforting word. As she grew up, she developed a deep love for animals and nature, often spending hours tending to her garden, finding solace in the simple beauty of flowers blooming in the California sun. Her life seemed to come together perfectly when she met Scott Peterson. The two quickly fell in love, their romance appearing straight out of a fairy tale. Scott was charming, ambitious, and well-spoken, and together they appeared to embody the ideal American couple. Their wedding in 1997 was a joyous occasion, and soon after, they settled into a comfortable life in Modesto. Laci threw herself into making their house a home, filling it with warmth, laughter, and the anticipation of a bright future. When Laci became pregnant with their first child, her happiness seemed boundless. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother, and now that dream was finally coming true. She carefully selected baby names, decorated the nursery, and joyfully shared updates with friends and family. The baby, a boy they planned to name Connor, was due in just a few weeks, and Laci eagerly prepared for his arrival. She and Scott had even discussed future plans, picturing a life filled with milestones, birthday parties, and family adventures. To the outside world, they were the epitome of a happy, expectant couple, excited to begin their journey into parenthood. But behind closed doors, all was not as it seemed. On the morning of December 24, 2002, Laci spoke to her mother and sister on the phone. It was an ordinary conversation, full of warmth and excitement, as she discussed her plans for the day. She was preparing for Christmas, looking forward to hosting a holiday dinner with Scott and their families. The house was already decorated with festive lights, and presents were neatly stacked under the tree, waiting to be unwrapped. The scent of cinnamon and pine lingered in the air, adding to the cozy holiday spirit. She planned to bake cookies that afternoon, a tradition she loved, and spend the evening with loved ones, sharing laughter and stories over a home-cooked meal. It was supposed to be a day of joy, of celebration, of anticipation for the new year and the arrival of baby Connor. But somewhere in the midst of those carefully laid plans, something went terribly wrong. By the afternoon, Laci was nowhere to be found. Calls to her cell phone went straight to voicemail. The hours ticked by, and as the sun began to set over Modesto, worry began to set in. At first, her family tried to reassure themselves. Perhaps she had stepped out for a quick errand, or maybe she was resting. But as time dragged on with no word from Laci, concern gave way to dread. Scott Peterson later told investigators that he had left home that morning to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina, a seemingly mundane detail that would later become a cornerstone of the case. He claimed that when he returned that afternoon, Laci was gone, her car still parked in the driveway, her purse and belongings untouched inside the house. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. By evening, Laci had missed her scheduled family gathering, a red flag that sent immediate shockwaves through her loved ones. She was always punctual, always thoughtful, always present. She wouldn't just disappear without telling someone. With growing unease, her stepfather, Ron Gransky, made the call that would set a massive search into motion. As the police arrived and began their preliminary search, the situation became increasingly ominous. The neighborhood was combed, flyers were printed, and the local news quickly picked up the story. The entire community rallied together, hoping for a miracle. But as investigators dug deeper, unsettling details began to emerge, details that would transform this missing persons case into one of the most infamous murder investigations in American history. When Laci didn't show up for a family Christmas Eve gathering, alarm bells rang. It was completely out of character for her to miss a holiday celebration. especially one she had been looking forward to. At first, her loved ones tried to stay calm, reasoning that perhaps she had been delayed or had fallen asleep while resting. But as the hours passed and calls to her phone went unanswered, their concern escalated into panic. A desperate search began. Family, friends, and neighbors combed the neighborhood, calling out her name, checking nearby parks, and knocking on doors, hoping someone had seen her. The police were quickly involved, launching an investigation that would soon grip the entire nation. Officers checked local hospitals, fearing she may have suffered a medical emergency related to her pregnancy. Flyers with Laci's smiling face were printed and distributed, turning Modesto into a city plastered with reminders of her disappearance. The media caught wind of the case, and soon the story was everywhere. But amidst the frantic search efforts, one person seemed eerily composed: her husband, Scott Peterson. While Laci's family was distraught, pleading with the public for any leads, Scott remained curiously detached. His behavior raised eyebrows early on. He didn't seem desperate, he didn't seem grief-stricken, and he certainly didn't seem like a man who had just lost his pregnant wife. As days turned into weeks, suspicions surrounding Scott Peterson grew. He refused to take a polygraph test, a standard procedure that could have helped clear him from suspicion. His explanations of his whereabouts on Christmas Eve shifted inconsistently, and his demeanor appeared rehearsed rather than genuinely distraught. Friends and family began questioning the cracks in his story. If Scott was as concerned as he claimed, why wasn't he out searching for his wife? Why did his eyes lack the panic that filled everyone else's? Then came the bombshell that shattered any illusions about Scott's devotion to his missing wife. A woman named Amber Fry came forward with a shocking revelation. She had been having an affair with Scott Peterson. But that wasn't the most damning part. In the weeks before Laci's disappearance, Scott had told Amber that he was a widower, a grieving man who had tragically lost his wife. The problem? Laci was still missing at the time. The revelation turned the case into a media circus. The once concerned husband was now the prime suspect, his betrayal casting a sinister shadow over the investigation. The discovery of his affair not only exposed his deceit, but painted a chilling portrait of a man who had been preparing for life without his wife, long before she had even vanished. As suspicions mounted, detectives turned their attention to Scott Peterson. A search of his truck, home, and boat yielded no concrete evidence. Until April 13, 2003, a couple walking along the San Francisco Bay shore made a gruesome discovery: a badly decomposed body of a late-term fetus, umbilical cord still attached. A day later, the remains of a woman washed up nearby. DNA confirmed what investigators feared. It was Laci and her unborn son, Connor. With the location of the bodies aligning with Scott's fishing trip, police moved swiftly. On April 18, 2003, Scott was arrested in La Jolla, California. He had dyed his hair blonde, had $15,000 in cash, and was carrying a survival kit, suggesting he planned to flee. In 2004, Scott Peterson stood trial for the murders of his wife and unborn son. The prosecution painted him as a man who wanted to escape fatherhood and marriage, driven by his affair with Amber Fry. On November 12, 2004, Scott was convicted of first-degree murder for Laci and second-degree murder for Connor. He was sentenced to death. However, in 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned his death sentence due to improper jury selection. Though his conviction remains intact, Laci Peterson's case became one of the most publicized murder trials in American history. Her story serves as a haunting reminder that evil can lurk behind the most charming facades. Even today, people continue to debate whether justice was truly served. What do you think? Was justice done? Or does this case still leave lingering doubts?